Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Afroditi Psarra. I have my Greek accent down. She comes from Greece and is now working at the University of Washington Center for Digital Arts and Experimental Media as an assistant professor. Seattle is very lucky to have her. She works on E-Textiles, often working with scientists and physicists. And she's going to talk today about E-Textiles and digital craftsmanship.
Yes,
Great.
Perfect. Okay. Just a second. Okay, here we are. Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Alison and Lee for giving me this opportunity to come here today and talk to you about my work. And it's kind of exciting for me because it's the first time that I have a public, mostly made out of scientists. I'm more used to talking to artists and designers, so I'm really looking forward to your questions after the talk and just seeing a different perspective from the work that I'm going to show today. So I come from Athens, Greece. I studied art sciences, actually, in bachelor in Greece. And after that, I moved to Spain, where I did my master's and my PhD on image technology and design. And I'm an interdisciplinary artist, as Alison said, working in the field of electronic textiles. And my PhD dissertation was on cyberpunk literature and new media art. So cyberpunk literature, most of you might be familiar with it. It's this science fiction genre from the early 80s that takes into account the cybernetic theory and pairs it up with the punk subculture in order to create subversive images and kind of these futuristic near future scenarios about how technology affects the human body. So it talks a lot about the idea of body extension through technology. And it's this kind of genre that started in literature, then moved on to visual culture, cinema, in films as we saw, like Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell. And eventually it found its way into visual and performative arts. So this is one of the first artists that I would say he's kind of related with this cyberpunk idea about extending the body through technology. This is Stellark. He's an Australian artist, a pioneer of media performance. And his work has to do with adding many times robotic limbs to his body to experiment with the idea that the body is obsolete. So the only way to kind of see where what our bodies will become in the future is to integrate computation in them. He's a pioneer, and his work many times kind of even exceeds the limits of science fiction, I would say. In my research, I studied a lot this idea as well of hacktivism that was expressed especially in the early 90s through the movement called net art that had to do with using the structure of code in order to create art that is hidden inside the code of what the internet is basically comprised of. And my research also extended to art scientists that work with quantum physics, like Evelina Domnitz and Dimitri Gelfand, which is a pair of Russian artists that I had the opportunity to do a workshop with them some years back. And I was talking just about that yesterday. It was my first time seeing a cloud chamber, something that I think we will see after the next talk. So it really gave me a different perspective on reality and made me think about all the things that our bodies experience and we can't really see them. They're invisible. So all this research kind of made me articulate my own practice, which is in the field of electronic textiles, and I want to explain in a little bit what this electronic textiles is all about. And also it gave me the opportunity to present my work in many different countries, in festivals and exhibitions. And it also gave me the opportunity to work for Disney Research Zurich. I was there for half a year in 2014, working at the Wireless Communications and Mobile Computing Group, and especially working with a technology called visible light communication, which uses the frequencies of visible light in order to create wireless networks for exchanging information. And currently, I'm an assistant professor at the Center for Digital Arts and Experimental Media here at the University of Washington. And I lead a lab called Soft Lab, which is basically a space in the digital fabrication lab of the department that is dedicated to the research of electronics, creative coding, and traditional crafting techniques. So what are electronic textiles? Electronic textiles and soft circuits are a hybrid form of handicrafts that utilize electronic components and creative coding in order to create hybrid objects that are very much applicable in many different fields, but also have a specific aesthetic, so they can be used as in a poetic language to create meaningful artifacts. This idea of the field, I think it's really rooted in this book from 1995 from Nicolas Negroponte, who at the time was the director of the MIT Media Lab. And in this book, he describes the physical world as composition of atoms, and the digital world as a composition of bits. And the characteristic of these bits is that they're immaterial and they can be transformed in many different forms. So it's information, basically. And together with this development of what is called as the maker movement, which is a contemporary movement of hobbyists, artists, designers, engineers that create these communities of exchanging techniques and ideas and sharing knowledge. And together with the craft revival, which is the revitalization of traditional handicrafts for the contemporary era. And also electronic textiles takes into account the idea of craftsmanship or workmanship, which is the ability of the creator to perfect his practice, in a sense. So to dedicate time and effort to develop the manual labor for creating an artifact. And the field of electronic textiles started basically to develop at the MIT Media Lab with a group called High-Low Tech Group, led by Dr. Leah Buckley at the time. Now the group doesn't exist anymore, but it existed for around 6 to 7 years, and it focused on doing research on different materials and techniques that could be used in order to make soft electronics. Like different types of sensors and actuators made out of piezoresistive materials, nanomaterials, what we call smart textiles, who are basically different textiles with characteristics like being sensitive to light or liquids or heat. And I want to go a little bit back now, and because I want to give you like a global idea about what electronic textiles is. Some of you may think, oh, electronics and textiles, these things don't really go together. How could we see them as a whole? In reality, maybe most of you already know this, but computation and textiles are very well tied together. From the Industrial Revolution, actually, the first computer to be ever designed of by Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace, the analytical engine that was at the time never constructed because there was no there weren't enough resources, was basically based on the function of the Jacquard loom, which was one of the first machines that were industrialized in the 1800s, and it used punch cards to create different motifs in the weave of the fabric, and that was the basic idea that was applied in creating the first computers. And 100 years later, even in the beginning of the early 60s, and until I think the late 70s, the computers and fabrics and different crafting techniques were really tied together. And in this image, you can see women in the assembly line weaving rope core memory for the Apollo mission. And that was basically computer memory that uses tiny pieces of ferrite and copper thread in order to create one separate bit of memory that could be polarized in order to withhold information. So there is at least more than 100-year history of computation, electronics, and textiles, and crafting techniques interwoven all together. So the artists and designers and engineers that work in the field of electronic textiles basically try to think of the future in a speculative manner and want to answer the question, what if electronics were made out of textile, actually? How would this look like? How would it feel like? And what would it offer to the person that's wearing it or touching it or using it? And here, this is a very new piece from two artists that are based in Vienna, in Austria, Ibru Kurbak and Irene Posch. And they've used a series of conductive materials that have their base in copper and silver. And these are all threads that have been used for centuries, actually, because they were used during the Victorian era, for example, they were used as decorative elements for clothes in order to create a mechanical computer. So each of these little circles that you see is basically an electromagnetic coil that, in the same principle as the core of memory that we saw before, it can flip and change between two states, on and off. Um, One of the pioneers of the field of electronic textiles is an artist that's actually based here in Seattle. Her name is Maggie Orth. She started at the MIT Media Lab as a graduate student in the late 90s, and her research focused on creating textile interfaces and researching new materials together with scientists and engineers at the MIT Media Lab. And in her work, she focuses a lot in the idea of entropy and how materials that have a specific life cycle can be used in order to express this concern about how technology fails and everything can become obsolete really fast. So I'm going to show a video of this piece. So this is a woven textile that has conductive threads embedded in the weave of the textile, and there are layers of thermochromic pigment painted on top. So all of these small wires that you see at the end of the fabric, they heat up specific parts of the fabric and they create different light and color patterns. And the characteristic of these pigments is that they have a specific life cycle. So if one uses them enough times, or if someone would leave this piece on working continuously, then these pigments would never be able to return to their original state. So they would stay in the state that they become when they heat up. Another artist that experimented a lot with the field early on is Joanna Berzowska. She's actually an associate professor at Concordia University in Montreal now. And she experimented a lot with the idea of biomimicry and how she can use this characteristic of camouflage that most animals have in textiles. So she created this series of dresses called spotted dresses that explore the concept of intimacy. And when one is basically, again, using thermochromic pigments, when one dress comes in close contact with another person's body, the dots become transparent. So they kind of fade out inside the dress itself, the garment itself. A very interesting, as well, kind of side of the field is digital naturalism. So there are, I belong to a kind of collective of e-textile practitioners that we meet once a year. And we exchange ideas and techniques about how the field can evolve. And I actually have with me a swatch book, which is a collection of handmade samples of all the participants that I would like to pass to you so you can take a look at it meanwhile I do my talk. Please be very careful because it's kind of one of a kind. And one of the participants, Hannah Perner-Wilson, again, she's also an MIT alumni. She went on a trip to Madagascar last year, and she spent a month in the jungle, where she set up what she called the Cloud Lab, and experimented with creating textile electronics from plants. So in the image, you can see she has made a capacitive sensor, actually, a capacitive sensor grid made out of leaves and a leaf speaker. that you can listen to music while you're in the jungle. And I can show a small video because it's really fun.
Being in the jungle. I love it's on our table here. Rice. Totally.
There is also a community of artists that are working with combining biology and textiles, and there is a sample of this in the Swatch book that I will pass around. And they are experimenting with bacterial cellulose, and basically they're cultivating kombucha and try to see how they can infuse the kombucha with different conductive materials in order to create kind of victimless, if you want, leather that can be used in making clothes, garments, and other soft circuit-based projects. A very interesting project also that takes into account this combination of art and science is this artificial skins and bones. That's a collaboration of Mika Satomi, another E-Textile practitioner from the group, that she's a professor at the Weissensee School of Art in Berlin. And they collaborated with a company called Ottobock that is basically doing prosthetics. And they invented this class where the students have had to come up with different ideas for prosthetics because, you know, prosthetics have a very specific aesthetic, and they play a little bit with this idea of the uncanny. So the students developed some excellent ideas in order to solve these problems with prosthetics. And one of them is creating this kind of second skin fabric that I will show a video that basically changes color depending on the muscle that the person that's wearing it has been using. And this project got a very important prize last year as part of the Ars Electronica Festival in Linz. So it's kind of a subtle and poetic way of visualizing movement for people that have the need for a prosthetic limb. Some 3 years back, I developed a project with an architect from Athens as well, that's called the Culture Series, that takes into account this idea of biomimicry and parasitism, if you want, or symbiotic relationship between a machine and a human. And it's inspired by a science fiction series of books by UK author Ian M. Banks. And basically, it's a garment that takes your heartbeat, your pulse, and transforms the variations of the heartbeat in moving patterns on the sleeves of the garment. And I can show you a video of how the prototype works. I don't have a video of the actual garment because it's been exhibited in Ars Electronica Center in Linz since last year. But basically, this is a piece of laser-cut leather that's assembled in this kind of form that resembles skin pores. And there are some handmade actuators on the back made with a wire called shape memory alloy that you can heat up and it contracts. It loses about 10% of its length. So it's kind of like a silent motor, if you want, that creates this kind of organic movement of the textile interface. Also, electronic textiles as a field focuses a lot on how we can create feedback from the movement of the human body. And I have developed a series of sound performances working with dancers that use a series of sensors on the body in order to sonify this movement through dance. I can also show you a small excerpt from a performance that took place in Norway in 2013. So this is a dress that has accelerometers embedded on the sleeves. So these sensors measure acceleration in 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. So as the dancer moves her hands, she can control different parameters of the sound, like frequency modulation, phase modulation, and panning, which is from which speaker the sound will come off. So this creates a very intense spatial experience for the public. You got an idea how it works. There's also a very strong social aspect in this field because it can be used as a way to educate people that have no background in electronics or in general in technology or how technology is being produced. And it can be a very hands-on way to teach basically how to make interactive objects. And this is a project by a Mexican artist called Amor Muñoz, and it's called Yucatec, and she has been working with a community of artisans in the area of Yucatan in Mexico, which is a very underdeveloped area where there's not enough resources for the people that live there. There are actually great power surges all the time, so many times at night they don't have electricity in their houses. So she has worked with this community of artisans, and they have developed flexible, soft, wearable interfaces with solar panels. And this is a way for the people that live there to create the conditions for themselves to kind of like live better, if you want, and they can even sell the electricity as a means of making a living. Staying with this idea of the social aspect, this is a project that I developed with two Greek artists, Maria Varela and Marinos Koutsoumichalis, in 2013. So as most of you also know, Greece is in a financial crisis. And the crisis started around 2008. So in 2013, we were asked to create an interactive work that was going to be shown at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Athens. And we could use data from the National Documentation Center of Greece. So we decided to use basically unemployment data from 2008 to 2013 that kind of represent the amount that the state has given in the manpower employment offices for their everyday procedures. And we wanted to visualize this data through a physical object. So we created a series of knitted textiles that kind of represent this physical archive of the crisis in Greece. So I will show a small video.
Economic threats represents a system that through the production of a textile comments on the very notion of work. By means of rethinking, modifying, and redefining the functionality of an obsolete knitting machine, and using both financial data from the databases of national manpower employment offices, as well as selected patterns inspired by Greek folk art, a textile is generated algorithmically in real time. Weaving has always been associated with hard domestic work, and as such, it has played a significant role in the course of Greek tradition. The loom, during the pre-industrial era, constituted a keystone in domestic economics, and later, just a few decades ago, knitting has been associated with domestic revolution. Subsequently, weaving is a symbol which places the domestic production at the core of finance. The installation economic thread enacts a mythology around the methodology of production and aspires to keep the weaving process contemporary and accessible.
And this work has been presented in many exhibitions around the world, and we have basically created something like 20 continuous miles of knitted fabric of data. And staying with the technique of knitting, again, Ibru Kurbak and Irene Post from Austria, they've worked a lot with how we can use knitting as a means of embedding messages and using it as an interface to basically broadcast radio waves. So they started with this work called Drapery FM, which is piece of fabric that has that is basically an FM transmitter and transmits the sound of knitting on a machine, and it transmits it at a certain frequency, and you can have a radio device and pick that up. And then they continued with what they called the knitted radio, which is a wearable project that is again an FM transmitter and is inspired by all the political situation in Istanbul 3 years ago at Gezi Park, where the citizens were not able to express themselves freely on online mediums. So they created this as a kind of alternative way of people to regain their freedom rights, and they published the pattern for everyone to be able to use it and make it for themselves through a traditional crafts magazine called Burda. Maybe some of you know it. And continue with this idea of sensing the invisible and exploring physics, basically, through textiles. This is a Belgian artist called Claire Williams, and she has developed a series of radio antennas using different crafting techniques like basket weaving, knitting, and crochet. And at the same time, I also developed a wearable electromagnetic field detector in 2014 during a 2-week residency in Linz in Austria, where this is an open source project that is published online and can be basically redeveloped by anyone. With the idea of creating a garment that one could wear and move around freely in the city and explore the invisible electromagnetic fields of the city. And this garment has 2 handmade coil antennas on the sleeves and 2 vibration motors on the chest of the garment that are hidden inside. So when you go close to a source of electromagnetism, say, a plug or a computer, a device, or a speaker, you can feel like physical feedback, haptic feedback on your body. And the zipper of the garment is used to control, is a switch, and is used to control also the sound. So you can hear sonification of these fields as well by plugging in headphones. And it's a low-pass filter, so you can even control how much, what kind of frequencies you're going to hear as a feedback. And a big part of my practice and in general the artists that work in this field is to host workshops and try to get people that have no background in this area to get involved, and basically spreading knowledge and experimentation between individuals. So this is a workshop that I did 2 years ago at the Bauhaus University in Germany. Again, with this idea of electromagnetic field sensing through wearables. And this is an image of the same workshop that was repeated at the E-Textiles summer camp last year, which is this yearly activity that all the participants of this collective meet in order to exchange ideas and techniques. And the Swatch book that you're looking at is basically created there. And also last year, I had the opportunity to collaborate with Cécile Lapoire, who is an experimental physicist from CERN. We participated in 2014 at the Innovator Summit at the Ars Electronica Festival together, and we saw that we had similar ideas about how technology should be used in maybe more humane manners. And we came up with this idea of creating a cosmic ray detector wearable for kind of creating, again, this body feedback about what's penetrating our bodies in each moment. So we had the opportunity to spend 1 month in Zaragoza in Spain last year at Etopia, a Center for Art and Technology, to develop the first prototype. And I'm going to show you a small video of the project. So basically, the garment has a microcontroller, and it provides visual feedback when immune penetrates your body. So these LEDs light up. There is a small vibration motor that vibrates as well in order to create this sensation of that something has passed through your body. And also, there is a wireless antenna that transmits the data in an online server that we set up in order to record all the data of the garment. And again, it's an open source project that we aim to circulate, and we would really love for other people to get involved and create kind of an array of these wearable detectors as a kind of terrestrial telescope, if you want, that could help in potentially studying cosmic radiation on the Earth's surface. Sorry? It doesn't have sonic feedback. The sound is just the sound, like a soundtrack of the video. The feedback is visual and haptic in this case. But it's a project that we would like to develop further. The first prototype that we made is using Geiger-Müller tubes, so it's basically a radiation detector, but we would like in the next step to use what is called scintillating fibers, which are fibers that emit light when a high-energy particle passes through them. So currently, I'm working on designing wearable fractal antennas, again, to detect electromagnetic fields. I'm really interested in the fractal shape and the potential that it has as an antenna, because it's multiband, so and it also radiates, so it can be used as both a receiver and a transmitter, and it can have a wide range of frequency detection from very low frequency to very high frequency. And this is a workshop that I did in Mexico City some months back on the wearable fractals, and I'm going to be doing one more at the end of June at IO Festival in Minneapolis. And I guess that's it. I want to finish with a quote from Mark Weiser's book, The Computer for the 21st Century, that the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. So thank you.
Have any questions?
Yes. That lady over there.
Hi. Do
Hi.
you are you developing anything related to the total eclipse on August 21st?
No, but that would be really interesting, actually. Yes, thank you for the suggestion.
Wanted to follow up. Also, related to wellness and clothing and message, are you working in that area?
I'm not working in that area in the sense that I'm working more in the artistic application of it. Of course, I understand that this is a field that primarily is connected to wellness. So, but I just wanted to show you today the different potential it may have, because we're all familiar with wearables such as the Fitbit, that's basically just a heartbeat sensor that can look and feel any way you want it to be. So it doesn't have to be a thin bracelet. Yeah. So thank you. Yes.
Hi. I'm curious, with a lot of your work, do you end up doing anything that connects your pieces to the concepts like IoT? I notice a lot of it's very isolated in how, you know, projects will gather data and transmit them to one thing.
I mean, there's already a lot of projects on Internet of Things. Personally, I'm not that interested for my own projects, but it really depends on the concept of the project. So, in this case, the wearable cosmic ray detector gathers the data and it sends them on a cloud. But it's still in the first phase of development, if you want. So maybe in the future, anybody could access this data and take them and create their own visualizations, sonifications, or do studies on them. So it really depends on the project, but I'm really interested in how you can create artifacts that are basically kind of disconnected from the grid, if you want, and can work as independent entities, if you want. Yes?
So have you thought about how to preserve your art over long periods of time? Because it seems to me that it is
very ephemeral.
It's a fragile media. And
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. It is a very fragile medium. In reality, I think that for my work, what I prefer is to publish all my work and creating the projects in an open source way. So basically, what stays on will be the documentation of the project and all the information on how it could be rebuilt and how it could be transformed by someone else. Yeah.
I just want to tell you, there's a Babbage machine here. If you
Oh, no.
at Intellectual Ventures.
Oh, perfect.
I was lucky enough to see it. You might want to ask them and go see it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, so it seems that you deliberately avoid thinking and talking about useful applications. Also, many are kind of obvious, as many have asked. So, is that what the artist does, and is that what keeps you the freedom of being creative?
I'm not a designer, so my work is not about thinking about useful applications. It's about creating questions. It's about creating experiences and basically making you think about this combination of art and science or art and technology and how it can relate to our society and the era that we're living in. So if I were to develop a project for a company, it would be something applied, but I don't feel that that's what artists should do. So the artist's role is to create poetic experiences. Thanks.
In regards to your cosmic ray detector, just a clarification, I'm not sure if I heard you right. Did you say it was detecting muons?
So yeah.
Entering the atmosphere, correct? So what was the material, the detection material specifically that allowed you to detect muons?
So we're basically using Geiger-Müller tubes. And we're using an array of these tubes. So with just one tube, you detect any sort of radiation. With two tubes, when you have a kind of synchronized signal on both tubes, you have a 75% possibility of having detected a muon. The more tubes you have, the more sensitive your array is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
I was just wondering, when you interacted with dancers, did you have any aha moments, or did it inform your practice any differently?
Yes, a lot actually, because in most of the projects that I have developed until now, I come up with the idea and I develop the wearable, and I realized that in order for the project to work better, it should be developed at the same time as the dancer actually explores it, because there are technical issues that you have to solve that you're not taking into account when designing something like that, or also taking as a starting point the movement that the dancer wants to portray. That's a great, actually, resource to kind of make you think what type of sensor to use to represent that movement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have another question. I know in textiles as a medium, there's a strong focus on craftsmanship from a historical perspective. So is that something that e-textile artists often think about when they think about computing? Because over time, you know, hardware components will eventually fade. And I notice a lot of the different components that you do use in your work could eventually become obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something, you know, in addition, you have your fabrics and other types of mediums there. Is that the other side of the medium of e-textiles, something that people think about?
Yes, and it has to do a lot with craftsmanship and with dedicating time and developing robust techniques, because electronics do fail, and they fail a lot, actually, really often. But again, I think we're not sure how this art will be preserved in the future. We already, media art is in general kind of art category that's very problematic in terms of reservation. So I think we're just documenting the projects for now really well and see if we have to kind of fix them or repair them in the future. How would we do that? Or maybe we see in 10 years that this had no point at all, and it was just, you know, a matter of playing around with different materials and techniques. But it is a way of expressing ourselves as well. So, yeah.
What's your next project?
Oh, my next project is actually the project that I showed with the fractal antennas. So I am now researching different materials that can be used in order to create fractal antennas, and the first tests I did were using copper fabric, and now I'm using this Japanese embroidery technique called sasiko, and I would like to create a wearable that's full of embroidered fractal antennas that, depending on their size and form, are sensitive to different frequencies. So you can see them as a kind of like hiking garment for walking around and picking up conversations or signals that you shouldn't.
Okay. In like I guess traditional like Swatch libraries, you have a space where you can go and explore this. Where do you actually find some of this experimental fabrics? How is that I guess manifested and shared?
You mean like the smart materials that we're using, right? So most of the fabrics and the threads are being used for EMF shielding. So there are special stores and factories actually that fabricate them. Some of them have been traditionally used for like the copper threads or gold and silver threads used in religious garments. Basically, it's the companies that are developing these products are also really open to seeing projects like that, because it's not the original use of this of these materials. I mean, it's not what they had in mind when they were creating these materials. So for them, it's also challenging to see how people are using their materials. So they're very open to you writing them and saying, oh, I want to do this project. Can you send me some samples? But yeah, right now there's a great number of companies around the world that are developing conductive and resistive fibers, piezo-resistive materials, thermochromic textiles, and all these sort of things. Yes.
Great, thanks very much.
Thanks.
I think if you have